Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Figure It Out podcast for, what is this? This is, we're in May now? Jeez. Okay, we're in May 2023. The year is almost half over. Think about that for a second. And I am your host, Adam Koralik, with the, of course, Figure It Out Productions podcast. And as joining me, as always, is the evil Rob Thanos. Welcome back, Rob.
The year is half over, and so am I.
Okay, that's depressing. And you also heard Joseph laughing there. Hey, Joseph, how you doing, man?
Hey, Adam. I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on again.
Always a pleasure. So, if you're unfamiliar, this is a Patreon-backed podcast, so if you support the Patreon, not only do you get access to it early, you get access to all my videos early, you can also have things like shout-outs, you can pick subjects, and you can even be on the podcast, which is, of course, what Joseph here did. Now, we want to give a little bit of an acknowledgement here. So, Abdullah will not be joining us this month. He's dealing with personal matters. We have some other backers who are eligible to pick subjects, and they didn't want to because they just didn't have anything. So, we're in a weird situation where we're just going to do a big super subject. So Joseph wanted to talk about one element of something that happened very recently with the Xbox, which we'll get to. And then we were like, well, Abdullah's not here, so that's another subject. And Chuck Shaw specifically it didn't have a subject in mind. So what we're going to do to kind of just placate everybody, we're just going to talk a whole lot about Xbox. We're going to talk about, the Phil Spencer's comments. We're going to talk about all the Redfall stuff and the Activision merger, just kind of everything. Are you guys game for this?
Yes.
I am.
All right. So, Rob, this was kind of your idea to merge all this together. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to just go ahead and lead us off.
So I think it goes without saying that if you've listened to this podcast in the past or watch Adam's videos, you guys know that we are very big fans of the Xbox brand. Joseph, do you have the new Xbox Series X or S or?
I do, but I don't really use it all that much. Although to be fair, I haven't used my PS5 much either.
So all three of us are early next gen adopters of the Xbox Series consoles, and we've had many discussions in the past about kind of the trajectory that Xbox has been on, and I think we could all agree that this trajectory has been of an upward trend for the past few years. Starting out with Microsoft absolutely fumbling the ball on the first play with the launch of the Xbox One and having to rebuild consumer trust in their brand. And they worked really, really hard during the Xbox One and the past couple of years to really remake themselves with the use of Game Pass, some really great support to indie studios, acquisitions like Bethesda and Activision. And everything was kind of looking pretty good. And it seems like in the past month or so, Xbox has careened off of a cliff, as basically three main things have really come to light. One, as Adam mentioned, the Activision merger, the acquisition of Blizzard Activision by Microsoft has been denied by the UK government. They have shut down the deal, so it is in a limbo state right now. Second, Microsoft has one of their big new releases is a game called Redfall. And Redfall, even though it was very highly anticipated, has shit the bed. Terrible launch of a very highly anticipated game from a very reputable developer. This is an Xbox exclusive, was meant to be a really showcase game for a Game Pass. So that, and then on top of that, Phil Spencer has been really making some statements to the public lately that are just very, I don't want to say defeatist, but they don't inspire a lot of confidence in me as an Xbox gamer, as somebody that supports this ecosystem of consoles. Basically saying that they know that they're not going to get PS5 gamers to switch brands and jump to Xbox to play things like Starfield, to play things that are exclusive to Halo. So it's kind of a bit of a shit show right now, and it's really worthy of taking kind of an extended look at where Xbox is going right now, and can they right the ship at this moment?
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but like when I first heard of what Phil Spencer said, those statements, I was just like, there's no way he actually said those exact words. There's no possible way.
Yeah,
he totally said the exact words. I was like, my entire initial reaction was, did Phil Spencer just Bernie Stoller the Xbox brand?
That's what it felt like, honestly. That was the first thing that came to mind. He really just shit on his own brand and basically said oh yeah, there's no reason to come over and game on us. It's really a defeatist statement.
Yeah, and the reason why that was the part of this that I wanted to talk about, mostly because of my initial reaction and thinking on it a bit more, I'm actually a little bit more mixed on it than I was initially when I thought it was just a completely, oh god, what the hell are you doing thing. But one thing we do have to keep in mind is that right now, what Microsoft's goals with Xbox is a completely different situation than what Sega was doing back during the Saturn, when Bernie Stoller famously completely ruined any chance of it having anything remotely resembling a decent sales record in the US. Because while they keep saying that the Xbox is the core of their brand and whatever, they are definitely still trying to move away from the Xbox brand being the box and want you to basically just play Xbox games on anything, if they could ever make that work. That said, a lot of those statements that he made, the one where he said there's no world where people sell their PS5s to buy Starfield, to get an Xbox and buy Starfield, statements like that definitely should not have been said, even if the actual box is no longer where Microsoft ultimately wants Xbox to be, as far as anything other than a way to get people to play their games. Because that just is well, then why are we bothering? But it's not necessarily as bad as my initial reaction would think, is kind of where I'm at now. I mean, it's still pretty bad. He probably also shouldn't have said things like, I'm paid way more than I should be for what I do, and stuff like that. That's definitely yeah, it's true, you should never actually say that.
I mean, Phil Spencer has always really struck me, for better or worse, as a pretty straight shooter. Somebody that doesn't mince words and isn't beholden to corporate speak when it comes to interacting with people in his ecosystem or press releases. He pretty much kind of shoots from the hip, which I do admire. But sometimes brutal honesty is not really what you should be doing this right now.
Business person,
yeah,
definitely.
I'm going to interject here, if I may. Actually, I'm going to tell you the truth. I've been kind of out of the loop here. So when you sent me this story, this was the first I had even heard of it. And I was like, oh, damn, what did he say? Let me go read it. And I kept waiting. I'm just going to be honest. I read through it and I kept waiting for the controversial part, and it never happened. So I'm going to be totally honest. What he said was the truth. He actually didn't really say anything that was a lie. Like Rob said, the guy's very much a straight shooter.
He definitely said the truth.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's where I'm going with this. So he talked in that article and in that podcast, that interview, whatever, exactly the way someone like I would, someone like any of the YouTubers would, etc. The problem is a mixture of people expecting better of someone in his position, saying well, he's literally the guy in charge of it, so if he says it, that deflates our confidence, which I'm pretty sure that he didn't really fully appreciate that responsibility when he was doing those particular comments. But also, he I feel like another element of it is just kind of the overblown clickbait element of it, like, you know, Phil Spencer said this, you know, and I can't help but shake that. It's just too much. It was too many people being angry about a few things that he said. Now, should he have said them? That's actually the debate we should be having. What he said was not wrong. It might frustrate us as Xbox fans or fans in general of video games, but what do you want? Because, I mean, the alternative was, like Rob said, he could have come out there and just done a bunch of corporate speak about, well, we promise to always bring the greatest experience to our customers, and everything I say you can't possibly trust, so what is the point of this interview? You know what I mean? Like, why even do one? So the guy tells you, like, straight up, and what he said was not actually unreasonable. He was like, yeah, the truth was, everything about the Xbox One launch, as Rob once again said, was totally wrong. It did cost them that whole generation. There was no chance of competing. You have to remember your history here. Phil Spencer is the guy Microsoft brought in to correct the errors of the Don Matrick era. Phil Spencer inherited the Xbox One VCR and all the problems that came with it. And I would argue he did a damn good job of correcting it.
I agree.
He looked at
Xbox
everything.
Still exists. I mean,
yeah. He looked at everything on the list of all the complaints everyone had, and he said, all right, let's try to fix that. Let's try to fix that. Try to fix that. All the way to the point where the Xbox One ended up being an amazing video game console. It really did. And, you know, even to the point where they, you know, it was completely unprecedented. He's like, you know what? We're going to make an upgraded version of the system called the X, and it will actually leapfrog the PS4 and the PS4 Pro, taking back the title of who had the most powerful console in that generation, etc. So I didn't find anything he said unreasonable. The problem was it may have simply been irresponsible, because in his position, you have to, like, approach it like the stock market is looking directly at what you are saying, and you are affecting your own share price. And that's the double-edged sword. He wanted to tell us the truth, and we wanted to hear the truth, but if he actually tells us the truth, this is the reaction you get. Mm-hmm. And now you know why this is why post-game sports interviews are stupid, because no one ever has anything to say.
Oh, it gave 110%. You know, we're really
exactly.
going to bring.
What is the point? You occasionally, like Giannis from the Bucks, like right after they lost to the Heat, he had like a legitimate, impassioned response that actually will probably be remembered for all time. But that's a rarity. You know, that kind of thing does not happen. And in this case, he gave you legitimate feedback, even if it's, you know, stuff you did not want to hear. But he didn't actually say anything incorrect. Just frustrating to Xbox fans. But that does not
I totally agree with you.
Wrong.
Like, my thought process, even when I first heard it, I was like, there's no way he actually said this. It was not because I thought what he was saying was wrong. No, I knew he was 100% right. I just couldn't believe that the head of Xbox was, like, actually just flat out saying that to people.
Yeah, but I think in a vacuum, what he said wouldn't have necessarily garnered some of the public reaction that it has, but it is compacted by the other stories that I kind of like touched on. Like I think in the same interview, he basically had to put out a statement addressing the negative response to the game Redfall, which was like their big, you know, quarter one exclusive.
Let's jump right into that now. This is a great segue for it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Redfall is I believe, was it made by Bethesda or Arcane?
It was.
Arcane.
I forget the team. It was the same one that made Dishonored
and Prey.
That's not well, that's technically true. It was made by Arcane Austin, which, alongside Arcane Leon, made Dishonored 1. But Arcane Leon made the rest of the Dishonored games.
So this game was, you know, really a tentpole release for Microsoft. Exclusive to Xbox, exclusive to to Game Pass on day one, and it was meant to be kind of evoke Left 4 Dead. I haven't played the game, but like that's kind of that vibe, online or co-op first-person shooter, fighting supernatural elements, like that kind of style, which would appeal to me. It's like I love for those Left 4 Dead games on the 360. So this game basically, it came out like right as this thing was supposed to be released, that the the game is no longer supporting 60 frames per second, that they couldn't optimize it correctly, so it's going to run at a max of 30 frames per second, sometimes dipping into like the mid-20s, which, to Adam's earlier point, with the Xbox One X as the most powerful video game console ever released, the fact that your game cannot run at 60 frames per second...
That's not true anymore.
Series X.
Series X, yeah.
I was talking about the Xbox One X, the upgraded version.
Oh, okay, yeah. But still, this Series X, the most powerful video game console on the market.
Is it?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And the fact that you can't run your tentpole release, which has previously been announced, that is going to run at 60 frames per second at 1080p or 4K, whatever your setting is, that's not going to be able to run that, and despite that, is still running like shit, is still looking terrible. This game is not ready to be released. So Spencer is now having to go on the defensive and basically call out his own developers, his own development team, on a tentpole release, saying that, yes, this is not right. This should have been delayed. This is not up to the quality standards that I have for our team. And so that, coupled with the comments about Starfield, just really have Spencer on the defensive right now, and it's it is what it is.
Yeah, like I really don't well, I mean, obviously the answer is money, but except not really, because it's a day one thing on Game Pass, and turns out that being on Game Pass actually hurts your game sales. Whoever could have guessed?
Yeah.
But
if only Rob and I had called that in a podcast, 2 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, granted, anyone with any sense of logic would know that would be the thing. The question is, would that actually be bad, especially for a first-party game when it could be used to sell Game Pass subscriptions?
Yeah. But
people on.
Here's the thing, though, is I keep using that term tentpole release, is because I guarantee you Xbox was really counting on this game to be a big hit. After this Hi-Fi Rush game, supposedly did not, according to some insiders, did not do as well as was anticipated, with all of the hubbub about Halo, the delays or lack of anything from Fable or Gears of War or the Perfect Dark sequel. All of these games that are expected to kind of give that first-party AAA value to Game Pass are not coming out. And when they do, they underperform, both technically and commercially. That's a problem.
That is a big problem, yeah. I'll be honest, I was actually thinking of canceling my Game Pass subscription for a while, a couple of weeks ago, but then a game that was interesting for it came out, so I kept it around. And the game itself, The Last Case of Benedict Fox, wasn't bad. It was also not a real AAA game. But I ran into an issue with how it saved, so I lost enough progress. I'm just I'll play this later. But
I had actually just to piggyback off that, I had canceled my Game Pass subscription for about 6 months, and I only reactivated it in the past month or so because I didn't want to pay money to play the new MLB The Show game. So I was just I'll just play it on Game Pass. So, but I had already gotten there because I'm yeah, I like some of the stuff that they're putting out, but there's nothing that's really, really drawing me in right now.
Yeah, my case is there's plenty of stuff on there that I want to play, but I don't have enough time to play everything I want to play, and I'm pretty addicted to 2 specific games at the moment still, which is Civ 6 and Stellaris. So
yeah,
it's if I'm not going to use it, I should just cancel it to save the $15. Yeah, it's not, the $15 for me isn't going to do much, but no reason to keep paying Microsoft to not play their games. Yeah. But say, I was interested in Redfall when I saw it, but then I heard about all of its technical issues. Oh, okay, well, I guess I'm not playing that. Yeah. I did the same thing with Jedi Survivor too. I was really, really stoked to play that, and then that came out, and on PC it was broken, and then even on consoles it was Okay, which isn't a Microsoft game, but at the same time, that happens like, oh, okay, I guess I'm not buying that now.
Yeah, who knew an EA game would be broken? Said, who knew an EA game would be broken?
I mean,
like
the first one wasn't.
Yeah, the first one wasn't because Disney, in no uncertain terms, told them, you screw this up, and we are taking the license away from you after all the crap they did with Battlefront 1 and 2, that they had to make that game work, or they were Jedi Survivor. If they hadn't done that, that was it. That was it. They would lose the license. In fact, they already kind of still did. It's now being shared with Ubisoft and other companies. And so this did not help EA maintain that. But that's obviously a separate story. On the subject of Redfall, now obviously I have not played it, but I have read about it, and like everybody seems to be just dumping on it. And I'm reminded of Cyberpunk all over again. Like, why do you keep doing this? Like, what if this is everything to you to get this game done, and you're betting a lot on it? Did you just not play your own work? Are you totally unaware of it? Or did you just decide marketing tells us that if it comes out in this, there's a theoretical chance we'll have a 30% increase and blah, blah. Like, do you never, ever play the long game on this? I mean, far be it from me to tell Microsoft how to make money. Clearly, they're good at that. But I am just beside myself when I hear this. Like, why do this? If it needed another year of development, put it out in a year. Eat that. You have to, because otherwise,
especially
there's no
if
point
you're
in releasing
Microsoft,
this.
like
yeah,
you're Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft's already pouring a ton of money into Xbox as it is. I mean, it's not like I know we've talked plenty of times about how Xbox still hasn't made a profit. I don't know if that's changed at all.
To tell you the truth, I don't know.
But I mean,
it was true all the way through the Xbox One generation. I don't know if it's changed yet.
Yeah, but like, if there's one company that could afford to just burn money to make sure that their product is good, to keep their brand going that they're trying to do, it's Microsoft. Like, it's entirely possible, like for like CG Projekt Red with Cyberpunk, that it's just that they dumped too much money into it and they had to at least release something to try to get some of it back and see how that worked out. But like Microsoft doesn't have that problem. Like, they're able to just be like, oh yeah, we'll just pay a ridiculous amount of money in cash to try to buy Activision Blizzard.
And we'll get back to that.
Well, yes, yeah. But that's an entirely different thing. Like, money is not Microsoft's issue. And yeah, obviously they don't want to keep. They would prefer to actually make money, but for Redfall, like they need stuff coming out that's good to keep people interested in staying with Game Pass. And so far they have not actually done a AAA game that hasn't had problems in this generation. That was a first party game.
I mean, I guess Forza, but
yeah, Forza usually runs stable enough. I'm going to speculate on something. This is speculation. Everyone listening, I don't know anything about this. This is complete speculation.
We'll put our tinfoil hats on.
Yeah, precisely. Put those on. We got a conspiracy hat. I admit I don't know any of this. This is not about gay frogs. I don't know any of that. This is just straight up. I don't know. I'm making this up, but I'm just throwing it out there. It is possible there's a lot of things behind the scenes of this game we don't know. It is possible that the development cycle was a nightmare, that maybe a team lead was getting ready to quit. They were going to have to start the game over from scratch, etc., etc. Like, we have no idea. This could have been another, like, what was that Fable game they canceled, Fable Legends, or like Scalebound or something like that, where the game was in an irrecoverable situation, not because the game itself was necessarily having issues, but the team producing it was, employees getting fired, different things are, behind the scenes that we're unaware of. And somebody at Microsoft said, we have two choices: release it as it is, or just cancel it outright, which is the worst look. We don't know that. I am pulling that completely out of my butt. Like, I'm just saying, I very seriously doubt that somebody at the team Xbox looked at that game and said, yes, this is ready. People are going to love this. I really doubt that happened. So if that's the case, there is an explanation. Now, the gross oversimplified one would be like some guy being like, if we put it out now, it'll make more money than if we put it out in 6 months. I don't know why Christopher Walken is working at Xbox, but anyway, it is possible it was a situation like that, I grant you, but it's also possible it's just behind the scenes things that we don't know. And maybe we will never know. Maybe we'll know in 10 years, or if anybody even cares. But it doesn't change the fact at the end of the day, the product they delivered is a bad one. It is a bad look all around. That's all you can really say about it.
And
Yeah.
And listen, this kind of ties into another point that I feel like I'm a broken record by saying this, that there are no AA games anymore, that Xbox really, I think, needs at this point. Like, they have a lot of video game IPs that are basically sitting idle doing fucking nothing. And a lot of those IPs could have been really solid, like, AA games if they just licensed it out to a trusted developer or trusted one of the million independent game studios that they've acquired over the past 5 years with. Like, take something like Adam always says, a Conker, or a Banjo-Kazooie, or a Blinks the Time Sweeper. Fucking anything. Just
Microsoft owns Blinks the Time Sweeper?
Yes.
Microsoft Studios made it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything to basically feed Game Pass, like, exclusive titles that aren't just AAA games that come about, like, once a quarter or 3 times a year. And granted, the great, feel like never-ending supply of really solid and inventive independent games that are on Game Pass, which is really mostly what I play on Game Pass now, is really good indie games. So besides those, like, give like a little jolt to your Game Pass by putting a game in there, kind of like what they did with Battletoads. Battletoads was, it's a little 2D side scroller, so it's not something that impressive, but like, take that IP, give it to somebody else, try and like generate some interest in some dormant IPs and get some extra incentive for people to subscribe or continue to subscribe to Game Pass. They're just not doing that. What?
Do you know what you're describing? You're describing Sega's current business model.
Exactly. How bad is it?
They just loan out their IPs and say, "Hey, fans, make a better game because we can't." And then they do, and then everybody wins.
How bad is it that we're telling Microsoft to act more like Sega?
Pretty bad.
Yeah. I love me some Sega, obviously.
Yeah.
And hell, like in the last 5 years or so, like Sega's put out games at like a $40 price point. Like Valkyria Revolution. Those, granted, Valkyria Revolution sucks.
Do you mean Frontier?
No,
Sonic
Forces.
Frontiers. You actually meant Forces. Okay.
Forces came out at $40.
Well, it's because it was $40 worth of game.
It was probably $20 worth of game.
Actually, price games lower.
I'm just busting your balls.
I know. Like, I'm pretty sure Frontiers was $60. So.
Yeah, it probably was, but I think it got discounted to $40 very quickly, at least for sales purposes, before going back up. I got it on Black Friday for that. So.
Well, yeah, but I'm not counting sales. Like, Forces launched at $40.
No, I know what you mean. MSRP. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. But Microsoft's not attacking that nostalgic area that they really have not, taken advantage of. They announced something like that Perfect Dark sequel, 3 years ago at this point? Have never heard anything from it about its development. But there's nostalgia there. There's nostalgia for a Conker or a Banjo-Kazooie. Yeah.
I agree with you. I've been talking about doing Conker for years, But what's funny that you mentioned that is because, and now tying it a little bit more to Phil Spencer's comments, I swear there was an interview with him like a month or two ago where I guess he was claiming they had actually talked about doing an Xbox Mini like around the time of the craze of that.
Yeah.
And ultimately it just never went anywhere. They just never really did it, but they had thought about it. And it's it's true. They were the only ones that never did anything. Yeah. Sega did 2 of them. Sony did one.
Fucking Konami did one for the TurboGrafx.
Konami did one, and they didn't even own the PC Engine. They didn't even make it originally, and they did one. You know, I think in Europe we got Commodore stuff. Like, you know, like everybody did it, other than Microsoft. They just didn't do anything. I mean,
let's be fair to Microsoft. They're the one company whose first system was probably still a bit too powerful to actually do a mini of.
That is not even true. That is not even true. They could have done, I mean, this is an extreme technicality and only would have worked in Japan, but they could have done MSX stuff.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, that would have been cool. That would have only worked in Japan, to be fair. But at the same time, I sit there and I go, if anybody is going to be able to do this and take one on the shoulder and like the price point, it's going to be Microsoft. And if anybody's going to care about the fact that it's not really the Xbox versions, but instead is like PC ported, watered down versions, in the sense that it's like, I'm not going to say emulation, but PC ports of Halo, which is a thing. You know, stuff like that. Just cherry picking some of those and getting them to run on like almost like a RetroPie type of thing. People wouldn't have cared as much with Microsoft stuff because they expect PC-like content out of them anyway. Essentially making a low-grade PC into a little Xbox case and just say like, yeah, here's 10 odd games or whatever, we're charging $100 and call it a day. I don't think was totally unreasonable, especially given how many of the IPs they own, as Rob pointed out, how many they clearly resurrected and refreshed the licenses to for ones they didn't own, since they have done the backwards compatibility program, which consists of 66 titles. So it was never inconceivable, and Phil Spencer said as much. He just kind of said, and we just, meh. That was pretty much it. It was not like anything other than, meh. You know, we just didn't really pursue it. So Rob is completely correct when he says they just don't really care to pursue that nostalgia, that area. And maybe it's other than backwards compatibility, which you have to give them a point for.
Yes.
Because they're the only ones that do it. The only ones. Granted, they gave up on it, but they were the only ones that did it.
Well, I mean, the PS5 can play PS4 games, but...
Yeah, but the Xbox Series X goes back their entire history other than MSX. Does.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure about this, but Microsoft might have sold their portion of whatever they owned of MSX a while back, back when it was still relevant. So that might be.
That's probably true. I know they developed MS. I believe I'm pretty sure that refers to Microsoft. But
yes,
so I don't know a whole lot about the MSX history, to be honest. I do know that they created it, or at least were involved with it heavily. That doesn't really matter. It was mostly a gag when I was saying that they should really make one of those. That might have worked in Japan, but you couldn't have put Xbox on it. It would have had to been like MSX Classic, and it would have been a separate thing, whatever.
Oh yeah,
irrelevant to the point. But yeah, doing some sort of Xbox Mini, I guess, would have been neat. It's different than the Dreamcast situation because, as you said, Joseph, every other company has to make money on a product. Like Sega part of the reason they never did a Dreamcast Mini is that it was either not going to be financially viable or the technology wasn't ready. You could only have one or the other. So you could make one where the tech is good, but it will cost too much, or you can have one where the tech isn't ready, so the games don't perform well, but it's cheap. That's not a win scenario. So Microsoft's in a weird situation where they could afford to lose money on it and be like, whatever, who cares? We made something cool and it made people happy, and that's just goodwill for us. And they could have, they just didn't. But that more my point isn't why didn't we get that, as opposed to why don't they care as much about the nostalgia base? Why don't they do exactly what Rob's saying, loan out some of their IPs to indie studios and let them make Battletoads in 3D or whatever? I agree with you, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, I get, why they wouldn't. I think they want to try and focus on sustainability and create like new IPs, like the new hot game that can kind of propel them forward.
Phil, the problem with that argument is Phil Spencer himself, in that interview we were talking about, essentially he is describing that problem with Starfield specifically. Starfield is a brand new IP. Granted, it has been in development hell for years, as we all know, but it's a new IP, and the reason that you're not getting PS5 gamers to jump over to Xbox is because it is almost impossible to do that with a new IP. You have to we just live in this era. We are the nostalgia generation. We live in an era where people will only get super excited about something that could theoretically move them from a platform or a fan base if there's some sort of nostalgic pull to go back to a classic, some sort of thing that you remember from childhood, whatever. Starfield is exactly the wrong game to do that. It'll be a big game, it might be a good game, it might be a successful game, but he's absolutely right. It's not going to bring people over. What theoretically could is if you had a bunch of PS5 gamers that, this is not the system seller that Starfield will be necessarily, but the nostalgia seller would be something like A Conker's Bad Fur Day 2, where you can only get that, and there's a whole bunch of kids who grew up on that in the N64 and to the Xbox version to a lesser extent who are like, man, that actually is something I would jump ship for, or at least pick up an Xbox for. But they don't do that. They want to reinvent the wheel constantly, which is nice. It's noble. In the sense, it's almost like Phil Spencer telling the truth in an interview where he shouldn't have. It's the same thing. It's like they are constantly generating new IPs, which is great, but it's also contradictory because it's not actually what works, despite the fact that's what we all say we want. Humans are stupid.
Or, those PS5 gamers that might look at a Conker's 2 and say, oh, that's interesting, I want to play it. They're not going to buy an Xbox. They're going to go onto their computer, and they're going to download the Xbox app and play it that way.
Yeah. That is 100% valid. That is 110% valid.
Yeah, I am definitely not going to be playing Starfield on my Xbox. I'm going to play it on my PC with the 3090 that I spent a ridiculous amount of money to get in there.
So, if only there was a bearded YouTuber who had once made a point that maybe cannibalizing your exclusive content to distribute on a competing platform, namely taking Xbox content and moving it to PC, wouldn't be the best move for your home console. I can't remember the guy's name.
I don't remember Gerard the Completionist saying that.
Yeah, me.
Oh, yeah, it might have been him, but I can't remember. It's isn't this just common sense level stuff? And the problem is that Microsoft has to support multiple platforms. I get it. I can see why Phil Spencer would be frustrated because Microsoft's such a big company that he probably can't do anything unilaterally, and he probably has to compromise on a lot of stuff that he knows is stupid. But at the same time, it's like it has to happen, or it's not happen, or nothing is happening. And that's a no-win situation because he's probably like, I'll be here forever, but the guy who told me to do this, he'll be over at a different company in 6 months. But right now, he has the power to make this happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whatever. That's us kind of complaining about Redfall, I guess. Let's move on to the next part.
So
the Activision merger thing.
Yeah. Last but not least. So I guess this is the thing that I would point is what really kind of started this Xbox troubling era.
I would call it the recent Xbox hat trick.
The kerfuffle, hat trick.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that the United Kingdom's Competition and Markets Authority, called the CMA, basically said, "Hey, that's a nice merger that you're proposing between Microsoft and Activision Blizzard. Would be a shame if somebody vetoed it." And basically the CMA in the UK has torpedoed any chance currently as constructed of the Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard going through. Now, Microsoft can appeal this, and I'm sure they are going to, but this is a massive blow to Microsoft because this was a giant acquisition, the biggest acquisition in gaming history of one corporation acquiring another developer. And I know that Xbox was banking on having that sweet Activision content, your Call of Duties, your World of Warcrafts, all of these giant IPs on Xbox and eventually exclusive to Xbox. And
PC.
And PC.
As we just said. It's not really an exclusive. Yes. But nobody buys our system for its exclusive because they're not really exclusive, dumbass. Mm-hmm. Why is this hard? Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
But, this is a big blow to Microsoft. I don't know where they go from this. If they, obviously they're going to appeal this decision, this antitrust decision from the UK government. But if they can't do it there, are they going to explore the merger still happening elsewhere? Are they going to explore it happening, still in Japan or in the EU or in North America only? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered about how this is going to proceed.
So I have a few things to say on that. One, there are certain countries where this already did go through, by the way. Like Saudi Arabia approved it. The UK in particular, yes, it did not, but that they only have authorization over themselves and any of their overseas dependencies that still remain from the British Empire era, the ones that don't have any level of self-autonomy, which frankly is not too many. In other words, it may not affect most places. Now, you're absolutely right. They are going to appeal it. They are going to do that. Microsoft is not going to be like, oh, all right, I guess we won't. Like, they're going to do something.
Yes.
Like, that's inevitable. But I have to toot my own horn here, as if I haven't done that enough on this podcast. Go back to November of 2022 and watch my 2-year anniversary of the Xbox Series X. Go ahead and do it. There's a part where I'm talking straight up about the Activision merger, and I straight up said this will get blocked in the UK. I said it. Go back and watch it. It is there. I said it. And I was right. I was right 6 months ahead of that. And so I'm kind of proud of myself on that one, to be honest. But at the same time, like, I do believe that there will be some variation of this that continues to proceed. And that sucks for the UK situation, but it doesn't necessarily prevent it from working everywhere else. Now, the reason it's like, we got to put this in perspective. There's like 200 countries in the world, and not that Microsoft is necessarily going to operate in every single one of them. Like, you don't really care if North Korea approves you or not. But the point is, just because one particular country denies this merger, that doesn't actually kill it. That's not how it works. It's more like, okay, well, within the confines of that country, Microsoft cannot put their name, I guess, on Activision content. There's... we'll see what happens. Like, Microsoft's got a ton of lawyers. They have a bunch of creative people. They're going to find ways around this. I think really where it matters the most is the United States, considering that both Activision and Microsoft are American companies.
If it gets blocked here, then the deal's dead. But
yeah, exactly. Then it's irrevocable. Like, there's no solving it at that point. But all it would really mean in practice, again, I'm not an expert on this particular concept, but all it should mean in real practice is that any Microsoft Activision title where it's unified in, like whatever country, like Saudi Arabia, for example, it actually would be there. In any other country that blocks it, say the UK, they would just have to do it separately in some fashion. I mean, that's about all it boils down to, I think. But I'm curious, but at the same time, the only reason this matters is because the UK is like a first world country where they have money, they speak English, like, it's their input matters. If North Korea or Cuba or somebody like that was like, no, we're not going to let this go, it would be like, that's nice, I'm going to go about my day now. Like, it would not matter. So it only matters because they are a significant economic market. If the EU prevented it, that too would be a huge blow. And not to get any sort of political here, if Russia blocks it, if it even be presented to them, which I really doubt given the current climate, no one's going to care. It only matters because the UK is a significant economic English-speaking market. That's the only reason this matters. And I still believe they'll find some sort of backdoor to get something through. In practice, if it passes in the US, that's the biggest one. If it passes there, ultimately its effect will be trickled throughout the other markets. All this may eventually mean, here I'm going to throw out another random prediction. If it gets passed in the United States, all this could eventually mean is that the British citizens in particular will have a more annoying time accessing games than we do. So if something, for example, is owned by Microsoft Activision in the United States and they can just quickly throw it up on Game Pass, it is possible that within the UK specifically, it's not available on Game Pass because they're not allowed to own it there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's possible. It's possible. Anyway, sorry, Joseph, go ahead.
I mean, honestly, like, I do not actually want this merger to go through. The consolidation of the game industry is bad enough without Microsoft buying the biggest or one of the biggest game publishers that exist. It should, but I think we've probably talked about this before, but
we have, and that to be fair to our whole point here, none of us are taking, like as Joseph just did. Rob and I are not taking a stance on whether we're for or against this merger. We're just talking about the ground game of what's actually happening.
Fair.
But yeah, go ahead, Joseph. Sorry.
But yeah, like you said, like with the if it goes through in the U.S., it's probably fine, except with like a few hoops. I'm just a little confused on why the UK, the CMA, they said they blocked it because of the danger it could pose to like the future development of the cloud gaming industry.
Yes.
Which is completely baffling to me because Activision, I mean, other than, the fact that, Activision has a lot of content and whatever and a lot of IPs, they're not working on cloud technologies as far as I know.
That's the really interesting thing. I read this kind of same Kotaku article about why the CMA, kind of like looking over their wording of why they struck down this merger. And yeah, it was not about, Call of Duty is going to be exclusive to Xbox and that's bad.
Or Microsoft will just have too many game IPs.
Yeah, it's not that. It's that they are concerned about cloud gaming. And granted, Xbox does have a cloud gaming component to Game Pass called xCloud. I have messed around with it. It is extraordinarily laggy.
Yep.
But I mean that they are looking at cloud gaming as the future of gaming, and I guess they would just see Microsoft in, let's say, 10, 15 years when cloud gaming has maybe stabilized to a usable point, that a Microsoft that has an Activision and Blizzard under its wing and being able to cloud stream something like a Call of Duty game is bad for startup companies being able to establish their own cloud gaming services. Now, I think this is interesting if Google Stadia, and this is like dragging this thing from the grave, but if Google Stadia hadn't collapsed, would this deal have gone through? Because with the collapse of Stadia, really the only big name that has done anything comparable in the cloud gaming sphere, they went under. So there's no big competition for Microsoft right now in terms of console cloud gaming or gaming via your Xbox Game Pass on your phone or tablet.
Whatever happened to PlayStation Now?
I guess it's still there.
I think it's still around.
That should tell you everything you need to know.
That's kind of the point.
The fact that we all just kind of sat in silence for a second. And
they're like, what about...
Yeah, what did happen to that? Is that a thing?
I mean, technically, yeah, I know it exists. It's probably part of their new PlayStation Plus.
Well, I know you can't download PS3 games on PlayStation Plus. You have to stream them via cloud streaming. So I think that's, I guess, where PlayStation Now is. But I mean, it's an interesting study that, that I think most of us are looking at this in a two-dimensional way. Of the UK blocked the merger because they feel that three major console companies is too small already, and they don't want one getting too big. It's a trust-busting thing. But they're kind of playing chess. They're thinking like 3-4 moves ahead. They're looking at possible innovations in technology that Microsoft could bring and start to monopolize, and that's cloud gaming. And that's the interesting thing. How they would counteract that in their appeal to the CMA. How would they address their concerns about the future of cloud gaming as opposed to just IP exclusivity? That's the interesting thing.
I just had the stupidest idea that might actually work. Cut a deal with Sony. Go to them and be like, look, stop objecting to us doing this. Stop getting in the way. We'll give you some Call of Duty for a while, and then we will do you the biggest favor ever. We will build you your own cloud ecosystem because you suck so bad at this. And you can just have it. You can just have it.
And then shut the fuck up.
Yeah, you are technically competing with us. Nintendo is going to keep eating glue. They're never going to do this. So you're the only game in town. I am not sitting here saying I take a side on the Activision merger. To tell you the truth, I don't know. I waffle back and forth on it all the time. But what I will say is this reeks to me of like, hey, Michael Jordan, you're not allowed to compete in the Olympics because no one is as good as you, so you have to sit it out. That's just like... What are you talking about? Like, it's not their fault that no one else wants to make competent cloud gaming content. Why is that Microsoft's fault? As you point out, Activision doesn't even really do that. But at the same time, it's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to force Sony to be good at it? How are you going to force Nintendo to be good at it?
How are you going to force startups to exist and be good enough at it to last long enough to actually become an established player?
Yeah.
In other words, I'm not saying I disagree with their final decision to break up the merger. Actually, I'm not sure where I stand on that. Their justification, to me, is dumb as hell.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else got any thoughts on this?
I don't know. I mean, I mean... I don't know where this is going to go from here. I mean, I think we're really going to be able to see a much clearer end to this when the FTC in the United States rules on this acquisition. But regardless, this is not good for Xbox. This definitely hurts them. Sure. This is a net gain. This is exactly what Sony wants. I mean, Sony must be popping champagne right now. The fact that one of the biggest gaming markets in the world just shot down this deal. That's definitely big.
Fun fact: the UK is the only major European economy where Xbox actually legitimately competes. By the way,
yeah,
it's pretty much Germany occasionally does okay, but market share in Europe for PlayStation is typically completely dominant. And that's not to say that it doesn't do well in the UK. It certainly does. But at least Xbox is noticeable. Yeah. At least it's like a legitimate competitor in the UK. So that is part of the reason this matters, too, is it's kind of Microsoft or Xbox's foothold in Europe, even though it's not part of the EU. So that must be mentioned as well. Yeah, you're right. We will see where this goes. If the Americans kill it, it is dead.
Oh, it's dead.
It is very dead at that point. But, we'll see. That's all I can say. We'll see. Anybody else got any thoughts on this?
Nope. Just wait and see.
All right, then we're going to move on. Thank you to Joseph for obviously picking part of that. Abdullah, even though you didn't pick any of that, we wish you well, and we look forward to seeing you. And one of those, we'll just give you Redfall. How about that? That sounds pretty good. And then Chuck, thank you for the not picking a subject. You get the Activision merger, because why not? Okay, thank you very much, Chuck Shaw and Abdullah as well. So we're going to move on. We got a round of shout-outs. The following Patreon backers are all at the tier in which they get a shout-out. This podcast, this channel could not function without all of you wonderful Patreon backers. Thank you so much for your support. We got Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, Tim Inman, and Trey Wagner. Once again, that is Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, Tim Inman, and Trey Wagner. Thank you very much to all of you. Now, speaking of another amazing Patreon backer, we're going to talk about what Spencer Puryear wanted to talk about. Now, Spencer Puryear, you guys have never heard here. You've heard his name. I don't even know if we mentioned this. When Keith left, Spencer is a good enough guy that he actually upped his pledge to the tier in which he gets to be on the podcast, but he expressed no interest in actually doing it. So therefore, he just continues to give me a subject. And when I asked him, why do you want to do that? He was like, I just want to make sure that you're sticking around. So that is a nice guy. That is a dedicated guy. And thank you very much, Spencer, for your continued support, and to everybody out there who does this. And I don't mean to sound like PBS. Now, the subject that he picked in particular was actually kind of unique. He asked me specifically if I was, because I think he likes the travel channel that I do also, by the way, which, hey, check it out. There's a link in the description. I do a travel channel. If you don't know, go over there, watch it. You can see all these adventures. Rob's in a bunch of the videos. You should check that out. Remember the time, Rob, you saw a moose? Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Remember that time where you saw the inside of your eyelids for 3 days straight?
Yeah, go watch the videos in Alaska. They were fun. But anyway, so he wanted to actually have us talk specifically like, what was the best trip you ever took? And I thought, well, for this podcast, that's not necessarily the most appropriate question. So I thought I'd refine it a bit. Talk about trips that were related to video games and like what our best experience is with that. I'm going to go last because I imagine that I have probably the most to say about this. So Joseph really didn't have to be here for this. So let's give him an additional shout out because he stuck around and said, yeah, I'll talk to you guys, you stupid nerds. I'll hang around for this. So Joseph, what do you got? Go for it.
Well, like, honestly, like, not much for my own experience. Like, I haven't actually really done many trips where I would go out. I haven't actually done any trips where I would go out specifically, like, for game-related stuff. Like, I haven't gone to any retro game conventions yet or anything like that. Thank you, events that happened in 2020 for that. Anyway, but like the one thing I could really add is like, one time I was visiting my parents when they still lived in upstate New York and found out that like in the town that they're in that there was a game store there, and I was like, there's a retro game store here in this tiny town up here? Okay, cool, I'll go check it out. And I did, and it was a decent enough store. Like, they had a TurboGrafx there, and I was like, you have this here? Wow. I mean, granted, I didn't get anything for the TurboGrafx because someone came and bought all the games and left the system, but that was an interesting thing to see. But, like, other than that, I haven't really done much, and I don't know if I'm going to be actually going to a gaming convention this year or not. Probably not. Like, I was actually thinking about going to Missouri GameCon, but then I saw the date it was at, and was like, July 29th. Yeah, I can't go to that one. So
Joseph, where do you live again?
I'm currently in Richmond, Virginia.
Can you make it to Long Island?
Potentially. It would depend on when the Long Island Retro Game Expo is.
I have the date. I'm a guest at the con.
Cool.
Rob will be there. I will be there. We could do like a nice group photo for the podcast. Think about it. Just throwing it out there. You should go to that. Just saying. Just saying.
Google drive 8 hours and come to London.
Is it 8 hours?
I would have to fly, but...
Oh, you would? Okay. Well, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. If you want to do it, that would be cool. If not, obviously no real pressure. But I'm just throwing it because both Rob and I will actually be at Long Island Retro. Which, by the way, everybody out there, Rob and I will be at Long Island Retro. You should go there.
Okay. August 11th through 13th, I might be able to do that. I'll have to just double check and see things and figure out how much it would cost to get me there.
Okay. I'll help you out with flight stuff if you want. I'm always pretty good at that, telling you which airports are the cheapest and blah, 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 blah. Just you hit me up. We'll communicate. But, so, Rob, unless you have anything else, Joseph.
No, that's it for now.
Okay. Rob, what you got?
So, when you posed the question to me, a couple came to mind. Honestly, the 3 trips we've taken together, like, that are all, viewable on the Travel Channel, to Texas, specifically Dallas, Texas, to Montreal, and to Anchorage, were all pretty fruitful for, like, pickups for us. You can go back and see those. Those were always fun, because I like going game hunting with other people. It's not something that I do too often. If I'm, like, taking a trip internationally, it's, like, usually with my wife, and she'll, like, put up with me, like, going into some game stores or thrift stores for a little bit, but it is nice to, like, go game hunting with Adam. But
yeah, I'm pretty cool.
Yeah. So, but I mean, the easy answer to that question would be Japan, because the trip that I took down there in 2019 was incredible. It was my first time in Japan. So far, my only time in Japan. But yeah, really, really great. I got tons of great stuff there, but I think my answer, just to change it up, because I do believe Adam is going to probably focus on Japan, is...
You'll be surprised.
Okay. So, I think I'm going to have to go, just from a sheer surprise of how much I scored on this trip, will have to be my honeymoon in 2018. I went to Paris.
I knew you were going to bring this up. I knew it.
and Adam's like, we were talking like a couple months before. He's like, "Oh, dude, you're going to Paris. You got to go to Republic." I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" He's like, "No, dude, seriously. Like, there's
seriously, you got to Republic. I'm like, like, you gotta go. Seriously." Like, that's a great impression of me, man.
Dude. It's like, dude.
It's like there were two of me.
Republic, man. He's like, French, it's European Akihabara. And I'm like, fuck,
I
really?
I did say that part.
It's like, go to Cafe Ray and then go to Republic. Yeah, that's all you said about Paris. So I'm like, okay.
To say. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna, like, my hotel in Paris was actually only about like a quarter mile from there. So I'm like, you know what? I got a day, it's raining, I'm not gonna like do any like sightseeing or whatever, or anything romantic. So I'm like, yeah, we'll trudge through the rain to Republic and check out like a game store or two, that is supposedly there.
Did your wife go with you, or was it just you?
Yeah, she was there because Republic is actually a really cool like little district of Paris. So there's like lots of other like clothing and thrift stores and couture shops and stuff. So it's like a little shopping district. Really, really walkable. But yeah, so she came with me, but she kind of cut me loose for a little bit. And I mean, I give Adam shit for a lot of stuff. This, he was 100% correct. For those who don't know, Republic in Paris is European Akihabara. But good. Like, the prices are really good. Like, I left there with maybe 25 to 30 complete in box Sega Master System games, which are impossible to find in the United States. And I went there, I'm like, this is what I'm looking for, is Master System stuff. And I left with just every Master System game, halfway decent one, under, $20. Or, anything under $25 that I could find. And I made out like a bandit. And these stores, when I say this is not just like one, not two, not three. There's like a solid half dozen to like 9 or 10 stores.
It's like 10 retro video game stores like in a row. It's not even like you go looking for them. They're next to each other.
Yes. They're
it's
lined
like a
up.
city planner said, all right, all of Paris's retro game stores will be in this one spot.
Yes.
Like, it's insane. Anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, there was so much. In every store, I'm like, oh shit, look, fucking CDI stuff. Oh my god, look at this. FM, Amiga CD32. Oh shit, look at this, look at this, look at that. And yeah, I mean, I did not have a whole lot of space in my suitcase to be able to do this, but I made sure I utilized every available inch in my suitcase to fit as many games as I could. But to top it off, believe it or not, the most valuable game that I found in Paris, contrary to popular belief, is not Franklin.
Oh, we're going to talk about
the goat.
Hashtag Biblioteca.
But, yes, it was not that. The most expensive game that I picked up there for a ridiculously good price was at the Louvre Museum. Louvre,
yeah.
So the Louvre Museum, for a short time, maybe, I guess, like 4 or 5 years, was home to the rarest 3DS game ever produced, and it's Nintendo Guide Louvre, and it is a digital tour guide AR game to the Louvre Museum. And when you go to the Louvre, you could actually rent a 3DS console and like walk around with it and like look through the screen at different paintings, and it'll give you like the details of when it was made and who made it and like the techniques or whatever. It's a tour guide for the Louvre Museum. But I picked up maybe like 3 or 4 copies of this Louvre game.
It's also the only 3DS game that's completely region free.
Yes. It is, it is a European game released for the European market, but it will work on any of your 3DS systems. NTSC, PAL, or Japanese. And yeah, I left with maybe 3 to 4 copies of this game, and seeing right now, let's see, what does price charting have this game at? All I'll say, it was a very worthwhile investment. Yes.
Oh, dude, it was like a €20 game on site.
Yes. New right now. That game is pushing $1,000.
Really
nice.
Yeah, I have one copy of it that I bought there. I still have it. It's sealed, of course. There's it's a thing you never have a reason to open unless you're actually at the move.
No.
Like,
so yeah, like I got this game. It was like €20. I picked up a couple copies, just because I'm like, oh, this is so weird. And yeah, that's the best gaming trip I ever had. Was also my honeymoon. Probably the best trip I've ever taken.
To Paris.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fitting. So all right. You guys have to understand, everybody out there, that my perspective on this is going to be extremely different from theirs, because like my career literally is traveling around because of video games. Like that's just what it eventually morphed into. So before I tell my stories, I do want to give a small amendment, not an amendment, a PS to what Rob said there about Republic and Franklin specifically. I'm just going to tell you guys a story. So when I went to Republic the first time, and I walked into one of the stores, I was there for European exclusives, right? I had no reason to buy stuff that I could, like, just like Rob said, like, you're going to buy all these Master System games because they're there. We don't have them. It makes perfect sense. So specifically what I was targeting the most was GameCube exclusives. There's only like 10 that ever came out in Europe. They're very uncommon. Most of them actually only came out in France. And so I remember there were two things specifically I wanted from this one store. I looked at this glass case, and they had like a couple of Dreamcast controllers. They had the first-party Sega one, and then they had some third-party controller from a company I'd never heard of. I'd never seen this controller before, ever. They were both exactly the same price, okay? So I went over to the counter, and I got the guy, and I was like, yeah, can I get that controller? Now, the guy did not speak English very well, like, at all. He was just like, he just kind of pauses. This controller is garbage, no good. And I was just like, no, I want that one. He's like, this. He points over to like the legit one. He's like, this good. And then he points to the other one, bad. And I was like, no, I want the bad one. He was like, okay. He had to think I was an idiot, which whatever, because I kind of was. They gave me the same price. It wasn't even like I was saving money. It's like I just wanted it because I'm a Dreamcast dude, and it was new. I had never had it. So then after that, I took him to the other glass case where I wanted something, and behind that glass case, they had one GameCube title I did not have that was a European exclusive, and it was just sitting there, and Rob and I, it would change our lives. It was Franklin the Turtle's birthday bash
surprise.
or whatever. Yeah, birthday surprise. And so it was €3. And I was like, oh, sweet. I'm going to get that because, I want that. And they get the guy over there, and I point at the game, and he just looks at it. He's like, no, this game for babies. And I said, that's fine. I want that. He's like, okay. And then I took him to the counter. It's like, he must have been so perplexed. He's like, this guy's an idiot. Like, all he's doing is buying baby games and a crap controller that's not even for the right system. That's what this idiot. Americans are morons. That's probably what he is.
So I have to piggyback off this for a second. I think I told you this. Like immediately,
I'll hand you the baton of Franklin. I'm handing you the baton of Franklin. Go.
Immediately after, like, I went there, and I think I told you about my experience, and I guarantee you, I think we figured out that I went to this exact same store that you're talking about. The guy that spoke like zero English, but he had like glass cases full of really cool stuff. And one of the games that I got there was Mac and Mix, I think. It was like the McDonald's Global Gladiators game for the Master System. It's like a licensed McDonald's game. This game is utter garbage, but I'm like, I have to have it just because it's a European exclusive. I've never seen it.
And it's not McDonald's Treasureland Adventure, which is the GOAT.
No. So yeah, I get this game. I think it was in the bargain bin. Like, so it must have been like €5 or something. And I hand it, and it doesn't have a sticker on it. So, I bring everything up there, and I show him the game, like combien ça coûte, like how much is this? And he's like, he takes one look at it, he like kind of moves it around in his hand, takes like one look at me, and he's like, Just take it. Just like, this fat American tourist is buying his fast food games.
Yep.
So I guarantee you this was the same guy, just because he had that same perplexed, just utter hatred and disdain of American people and our choices in purchases. Yeah.
We're stupid. But the funny thing about that Franklin game, for those who've never heard this story before, I got back here and I decided, like, okay, I'm going to, test all the things I bought, whatever. So I popped in, Franklin, and I was like, all right, what is this stupid game? And I actually decided to play it for a minute. And then I sat there and I realized I was playing it for a few minutes. And then a few more minutes. And then I beat a few levels. And I was still going. I'm like, damn it, this game is good. Why is this game good? Like, and I was like mad at myself that I was enjoying Franklin's birthday surprise. I just couldn't understand it. So I think a few years later, Rob's like, hey man, I updated my GameCube. Can I, I've got a, whatever you have, like the Gecko or whatever, so it plays games off of SD cards and stuff. And you're like, would you mind kind of cloning over your ISOs to this? And I was like, yeah, I could do that for you. That's fine. And so I put all these games on, and then eventually when I saw them, I hand delivered it to you. We put it in, and I was like, okay, so here's the thing. You owe me for doing this. And you're like, what? You never mentioned that I owe you anything? I'm like, no. This is okay. You have to play a game now, but you have to play one very specific game. And if you do, then we're even. It was something like that. I don't know how well you remember this conversation, Rob. But so I put on Franklin's birthday bash or whatever, birthday surprise. And you were like, dude, what the fuck? Like, why are you going to make me play this? I'm like, just play it. And then what happened, Rob? You take it from here.
Oh, yeah. We played it for like 2 hours. We were finding like speedrun exploits for this game. This game is like baby's first Metroidvania. It's legitimately a pretty good game. So yeah, I had to, like, immediately afterwards I went on eBay and I think I spent like $75 on a copy of this.
I know, and I was
game.
like, dude, I got that for €3 in Republic, and you were like, yeah, well, now thanks to me, it's valuable, so you had to get.
I single-handedly bumped up the value on price charting for this game.
Yeah, really. Everybody thinks we're kidding. That is a good game. It has no right to be as good as it is. It makes, like, honestly, if anybody ever comes to me and like, what is a game that you can recommend that no one would ever think of? Franklin's Birthday Bash, GameCube. That's like, boom. That's it. That is the game I would recommend, because you just go into it thinking this is gonna be some like dumb Barney the Dinosaur level stupid shit. Nope. It's great. It has no reason to be that good.
It goes hard.
Yeah. So anyway, so that obviously that was just a piggyback on the rest of that story. Let me tell. All right. So as I mentioned before, I basically travel and talk about video games and stuff for a living. So I've that Johnny Cash song, and you don't hear me do music references very often, but I've been everywhere, man. So it's kind of hard for me because I go to like literally this last month, I went out to Kansas City for a convention that is related to my channel, which is video game related. I went to Milwaukee for Midwest Gaming Classic, which is, of course, video game related. I went out to the UK. I was invited as a guest to OLL Gaming 2023 as a guest, which is, of course, video game related. This soon, I'm right like in a week from now, I'm going to Columbus, Ohio for Korg, so I'm a guest at the. You understand what I'm saying? I have traveled a lot for video game related things. For me, it's not about going to get pickups. It's literally like, I don't even know what I could say as like the best one, because I've been doing this for years. So like, if anybody goes back in the old days and really watches it, like Ubisoft used to send me to things forever. For like a span of 4 years, they were just sending me wherever. It was insane. They sent me to San Francisco like 100 times, Los Angeles a bunch of times, North Carolina a few times, New York a few times, Paris a few times. Like, and I remember. So I'm just going to tell you because these people don't work there anymore. But I'm going to tell you a great story. One time, I got an email from Ubisoft. This is how much they liked me back in the day. Unfortunately, the pandemic killed all this because they just do digital events now. But the basic logic with events like that is they will contact you and they will say, hey, so we have a game coming up and we'd love to invite you out to our event. You can play the game, capture footage, and you're welcome to make video content. And I would do that for the other channel I was working on called Game Society Pimps at the time. And so that relationship started back in 2015 when I was in Austria for something completely unrelated. I think I was there for Gamescom, and I got an email from Ubisoft. There was one of their then just kind of like a intern was sending out the invite emails, and I guess he had watched a random video on GSP. He emails me, and because of the time zone difference, I was already awake, so I responded immediately. I was like, wait, you want to bring me out to Los Angeles to play Rainbow Six Siege? Yeah, that sounds awesome, let's do that. And so we just figured out the whole thing right there. And then I found out later, like when I actually went to the event, he was like, yeah, you got the nice hotel because you responded immediately, and everybody else had to be bussed in from downtown. So I got to stay on like, what's the famous beach in LA that I'm spacing on? Rob, you must know this. The one where like surfer dudes are always there. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger started his career there.
Oh, Venice Beach. The one that's
in Venice Beach, thank you. Yes, so I had a nice like Venice Beach hotel because that's where they decided to have an event and all that. So I had a great time. I was like, wow, I'm being spoiled like right out of the gate here. This is amazing. And so I just started to make buddy with everybody because that's kind of what I do at any social event. I'm pretty good at like just meeting people, remembering their names, getting to know them, etc. I never see this as a transactional experience because it's not to me, but to a lot of people who don't travel, it's kind of like, oh, I'm so in awe of this. I'm going to get this over with and go see what is here. I've been to all these places, so I'm not really in awe of the fact that I'm in LA. It's more like I want to get to know people, right? So meeting them, I got to meet all the other people, and then I started getting invited to like all their stuff, like all the time. And I could never really figure out why, because like I would go there, I would come back with footage, my team, we would make videos on it, sure, but they invited me to so many things that made no sense for me to go to. And the two that I want to point out here was one time they invited me to Paris, as we kind of talked about before, and one time they invited me to New York. And so I'm going to tell you each story separately. The New York one, I got an email from them saying, hey, are you willing to come out to New York like tomorrow? We're going to announce a new game and we'd love for you to be there. I'm like, yeah, like, you know, I'll go. I don't care. And they were like, okay. And I did the stupid thing of asking them what the game was. They're like, well, we can't tell you that. The whole point is to tell you what the game is. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. So they give me the flight, bounce out to New York. For me, it's a 90-minute flight. It's a nothing. It's whatever. I mean, they pay for all this, by the way. I mean, it's not like I was ever doing any of that. So I got to New York, and they're like, okay, you have a whole day in Manhattan. Do whatever you want. You're staying at the W Hotel. It's like, they spoil you, dude. They spoil you. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I go do my day, and they're like, next day you have a meeting in this one room at like 9 a.m. It's like an hour long, and then you're free to go do whatever you want. And I was like, okay. So it kind of sounds like... What's the thing where people try to sell you something? Timeshare. It sounds like a timeshare, but it's not. So I go into this little room, and there's some of my buddies from Ubisoft that I know, and there's like people I've never seen before. And it's like, I'm expecting the events, because the events were usually like big rented out spaces, like warehouses that are just full of influencers and YouTubers and TV screens, and everybody's playing stuff, capturing stuff. That's what I was used to. I walk into it's basically just a hotel room, like a suite, and there's only like 6 people in there, 2 of which I know from Ubisoft, and the other 3 are, plus myself, are just, you know, journalists. So I look at this couch, and I find out the 3 other people that are there in this event, other than me, one works for the New York Times, one works for the Los Angeles Times, and one worked for the Chicago Sun-Times, like 3 biggest cities and their biggest newspapers, and me. And I was like, what am I doing here? Like, why was I invited to this? And then what happens is their little meeting starts. All they did was come out with a laptop and just show us a trailer for Far Cry 5. And they're like, yep, Far Cry 5's coming. If you have any questions, feel free to ask us. And if not, you're free to go. And I was like, what? Like, this made no sense. Why would you spend money to bring me to this? And I couldn't figure it out for the longest time. So I'll circle back to that in a minute. Paris was a totally different situation. I was out in San Francisco, funny enough, at a Ubisoft event. And I got an email from someone at Ubisoft who was like, hey, just a heads up, because I want to make sure your schedule is clear. We have another Ubisoft event here in 2 weeks right back in San Francisco. Are you available for that? And I was like, yeah. And then they were like, okay, cool. And in like 3 weeks from now, we're doing a thing in Paris. Do you want to go? And I was like, I literally responded, Paris, Texas? Like, I didn't understand, like, why, what are you talking about? What do you mean, like, the real Paris? And they're like, yeah, the real Paris. Do you want to go to Paris? And I was like, yeah, bonjour, let's go. You know, like, and so I was communicating with them about that, and I was like, okay, with the Paris one, do you just want me? Do you want my team? Like, what are you looking for here? Because that seemed kind of odd. And I'm like, because the San Francisco one made sense. They're like, yeah, at the time, they're like, we got For Honor coming up. We want you to come play that, all that. But with Paris, we're just going to show you that we're working at the time. It was Ghost Recon Wildlands. And we just want to show you our studio space. And I was like, so what do you want from me? They're like, we just want to show you the studio space. Okay. So I was like, can I bring my whole team? They're like, yeah, you can bring your whole team. And at the time, the team consisted of 5 people. So one of them was with me on the trip. And so he was the first person I told. I was like, hey, man, Ubisoft just invited us all to go to Paris, like on their dime. Do you want to go? And he's like, oh, my God, yes, but I don't have a passport. Like, how long does that take? I'm like, that can take months. The trip's in 3 weeks. And so he couldn't go. So then I contact the other members. First one says, I would absolutely love to do it. No chance my wife will ever let me do it. I was like, okay, so he's out. Contact the second one on the list, and he just goes, well, yes, I want to do it. Yes, I'm going to do it. And I was like, okay, great. So he's in. And then the next one, I said, hey, man, they invited Paris. He was like, I don't have a passport, and I don't like France because I hate the French. And I was like, okay. So I just like, whatever, stupid, which makes no sense because I don't think he's ever even been there. It didn't matter. So then the one guy who was in suddenly responds later. He's like, actually, no, I'm not going. And I was like, why not? He's like, I don't want to talk about it. And to this day, I have no idea why he canceled it. So then it was kind of embarrassing for me because Ubisoft's like, hey, your whole team can go to Paris for free on us. We'd love to treat you guys to a thing. And I was the only one willing to go, which was frustrating. Fine. So then I was like, but yeah, I'll go. I'll represent us. I'll do whatever we need to do. So I'm in. Fine. And I take the whole trip, and it's literally, they gave me 5 days in Paris, and the only thing I had to do was go to their studio, which already was awesome in of itself, and just let them talk about Ghost Recon Wildlands. And I was like, do you need me to produce content or anything? They're like, no, just hang around, just learn about what's going on. That's all we want. And I was like, God, that makes no sense. And so I just never understood it. Years later, I had a friend who was actually at both of these trips. He was pretty high ranking at that team at Ubisoft, and he no longer works there, so it's okay to talk about this now. And I met up with him after he was no longer working at Ubisoft, and we just had like coffee. We're just hanging out for a bit, and I straight up asked him, I'm like, look, man, tell me about this, because you guys brought me to everything, and there was like some I understood, like the normal, we're going to San Francisco to capture footage type of event. Always understood it because we're going to make videos. That's good for you guys. It's good for us. Everybody wins. What was up with the stuff like New York or Paris? Because that wasn't even the only 2 examples. It's just the 2 I'm going to talk about right now. Why did you do that? Like, why did you bring me along? And he was like, look, you have to understand that our investors are very old. And they do not understand where gamers get their news. They have no idea what YouTube is. They don't know any of that. So they believe legitimately that gamers get their news from the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Sun-Times. So we have a social obligation to actually host these fake events that are not really fake because you are really getting the news outlets, but to give them the same information and prove that it was published, because we need that to happen so our investors are happy, when in reality we understand gamers aren't going to wake up and read, oh, wow, look, Far Cry 5's coming out. I'm glad I read the New York Times today to tell me that. That's not how you get that news if you're a gamer. No one will. But our old investors need to believe that's how that works. So we placate them. We make that happen. That is fine. And I was like, that's great, but I don't work at any of those outlets. And they're like, yeah, your purpose is we can't stand those people. So we need somebody that we like to be at these events who is entertaining. And I was like, wait, I was a clown? He's like, oh, you were the best. And I was like, I can live with that. I was totally fine with that. That made me happy. It's like, I got to like travel the world so much on their dime just because of that, as it turns out. And I was like, I'm cool with that. And I was like, how did I earn that? And they're like, the way you earned that is, you know, the initial trips, like I was talking about, they met me in LA and all that stuff. He's like, gamers are terrified of traveling. We've learned that over the course of this process of doing events. We will send out 100 invites to influencers, and we don't target PewDiePie or these major names. We will just find anybody whose content we find interesting for any reason. We will contact them and say like, hey, do you want to do this? Of the 100 we send out, 50 respond at all. 50 just ignore it. Of the 50 that respond, 25 will say yes, 25 that will say no. So of the 25 that say yes, 12 or 13 actually get on the plane, which means 12 or 13, the money was spent and they got too scared and didn't go. Of the 12 or 13 that get on the plane, 6 or 7 show up to the event, which means the ones that didn't got to the destination city and just never went to the event. They just used the excuse for a free trip. Of the 6 or 7 that go to the event, 3 or 4 leave early. And who's left? Me. I was like the only guy who ever just went, never caused them any problems, hung around the entire time, and just did the job. Every time. And so that gives you the best opportunity to start to meet people, socialize, and people start to like you. For everybody out there who's like, Adam, how the hell do you travel all the time? You cannot be making this much money to do this. It's true. I don't. But I've made a lot of friends over the years who will just... You'd be surprised. Major companies have these big budgets where they're willing to tell people, hey, we'll just bring you to stuff. We don't even care. I've been brought to so many things by so many companies because they know I'm not going to jerk them around. I'm not going to waste their money. I'm not going to do anything stupid. And whatever it is they're there for or having me there for, I do. Like when I go to a convention, I never leave in the middle of the convention and be like, well, I've never been to this city before, so it's okay if I don't actually go to the con that I'm here for. Never. Ever. Always show, be professional. And to anybody who's listening, who's aspiring to be any sort of influencer, that is my number one advice. Be professional. Do whatever it is you're there for. Do not get sidetracked by temptations because you've just never been to a place or whatever. Stick to it. Do the right thing. Do the job. So I have a million gaming stories related to travel. Obviously, I did an entire travel channel as a product of this. But I guess I'll go with that, even though I can't even say that is the best trip I've ever taken. It's just kind of funny.
And that is why you should play Franklin Un Universal Supplice.
Exactly.
Yes, obviously.
Yes. Actually, it was that trip to Paris is where I got it. So it all kind of ties together. So you can actually thank Ubisoft for having us discover that game.
Yeah.
Hold on. Did Ubisoft make that game? Hold on.
No. Somebody else did. Although Ubisoft did make at least one GameCube European exclusive, Taxi 3. Which has it was French only. It was never released anywhere else. There was Taxi to Les Jeux, which was a game on the Dreamcast. Taxi is a French film series that has movie tie-in games that have never been released outside of France. So in the Dreamcast got Taxi 2, GameCube got Taxi 3.
Huh.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. I agree. Any other thoughts on this or anything else?
No, I think I'm good.
Nope,
all right,
I'm
then
good,
Spencer.
Unless we want to revisit this in a couple of months after I potentially have a trip to talk about.
Yeah, by all means. Like the problem is, like I'm a freak of nature. You're not gonna be able to compete with it. Like most of my travel is related to gaming because it's literally my career.
Job.
Right, yeah. Exactly. So I mean, this podcast would never end. So it's just we have to cut it somewhere. So Spencer, thank you very much. A huge shout out to Spencer Purrier for that particular subject, and shout outs, of course, to not only Joseph here for joining us, Rob, obviously you too. Even though you didn't do any Patreon stuff, you just get to kind of leech off of Joseph. Abdullah, sorry you couldn't. Yes, Abdullah, sorry you couldn't be with us. Hope everything gets well soon. Chuck Shaw, also a huge shout out to you, as well as to Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, Tim Inman, and Trey Wagner. Thank you all for your support. Thank you everybody who's listening to this. Again, if you don't mind, back this on Patreon, back the channel. Let's keep this all going. Thank you much, everybody, for your support, and we'll see you all later.